Hey, Michelle, what are we doing today?
Hey, Maddie. So today we're going to talk about managing your expectations when it comes to college admissions. So we always hear these stories, they go viral. So there's like students who have near perfect GPAs, they have these amazing test scores, impressive extracurriculars, and all of a sudden they get rejected from over and over again from top tier universities. So today we're going to talk about like what happens when you think you check all the boxes, but the outcome doesn't necessarily reflect your expectations.
It is. It's a classic story in college admissions. Every year it happens, and well, yeah, there are reasons why. Let's go into it.
All right, great. So, okay, first, this just went viral recently. This was covered on MSN, Entrepreneur, even TMZ covered the story. So, his name is Zach Yadagari. He's 18 years old, and he started his own company called Cal AI. So, it's a nutrition tracking app and actually generated $30 million in annual revenue. This is an 18-year-old we're talking about. He has a 4.0, 34 ACT, but here's what happened. He got rejected from 15 of the 18 colleges, rejected by Stanford, MIT, Harvard, Columbia, Princeton, Duke, Cornell, only accepted by Georgia Tech, University of Texas, and University of Miami. So we'll talk about his personal statement in a little bit, but first just hearing like his stats and what you heard so far, what do you think of this outcome? Like, why did this happen to Zach?
Right. So it's funny. There are two versions of this story, and I know the young man you're referring to, and I'm pretty sure he's going to fall into the latter category. But this story is a staple of college admissions news and infotainment. That every
Mhm.
year, usually around now, there's an unlucky soul that yes, you explained it perfectly. They did everything right,
Right.
and I have found that those unlucky souls, they tend to fall into one of two food groups. The first is it's usually a female, I guess, but it doesn't have to be.
Uh-huh.
They are well, they do everything right, but, like, just like you
Yes.
said, they have stats, but we go into their extracurriculars, and they are a sports player, and an artist, and a singer, and a dancer, usually, and on and on and on, and those are the ones where I feel kinda and often their essays, they wrote about, like, overcoming mental health. It seems to be a common theme
Oh,
in the piece,
okay.
and I read through it, and I feel bad for the student because, like, "Oh, I know why that didn't work," It's like it's a lot of you can go back and listen to the last 30 episodes what we've been doing, and that is not the strategy that I certainly promote. It's like you don't
Right.
want to be a dancer and a singer and also an artist, but you're applying physics, so I don't understand. Like, that's option one. Then there's option two, which is, well, the kid seems like kind of a douchebag, I guess. And that was my big take. I've read this young man's application. We're gonna get into it in
Okay.
full. I was like, oh, well, screw yeah, and it's very different. It's a very different problem because as we're gonna do, this guy's this person. Their problem was not this very different issue that
Mhm.
they were spiky. They do have incredible accomplishments. That honestly I feel bad in a different way, and we'll get to this student application because I have read it, and I've read it with students, and we have had many a laughs over it. But yeah, yeah, this is a great topic because I think we'll try to kind of break down because that is the key difference I notice of like when it all goes bad.
Yeah.
I guess those are the first one covers the two major options. One is that, like, it's more than just stats to get into these top schools. Then also the student writes about stuff that is, like, not done well.
Mhm.
And then but option three is that, like, I wouldn't, like, this kid's a jerk. Like, why do you think he didn't get into Stanford? Like, but yes, go on.
Okay, so let's talk about then like the first two before we get into Zach and his, personality failures.
Sure.
So let's say you do check off all the boxes, but yeah, there's like some glaring omission or there's something that maybe doesn't quite, I guess, check all the boxes. I don't know. Maybe like an extracurricular, like you said, doesn't quite match everything else. What do students do about that?
Right, you keep saying the term, like, "check all the boxes." It's an interesting way to describe it because that is absolutely on my mind while applying to schools with students. We need to check all the boxes, and I'm
Mhm.
often using an ethereal sense where, like, it's almost to it's like I put the hat on, like, "Dude, just trust me," kinda thing with students. It's like, "I'm trying to check a box here," and often I'll just trail off about it. But the box that you have to know what those boxes are. Like, that's probably the
Yes.
problem, is I think check all the boxes is, in fact, like, part of College with Mattie's admission strategy advice.
Right.
But the boxes I have developed and are somewhat pretty bizarre, complex at this point. It's stuff like boxes are you need to be making it clear what role you'll play on campus. You
Mhm.
need to be presenting yourself as likable, but also warm. Your two boxes: either warm, high achieving, and effing love learning. Like those are boxes I check with students. You need to check boxes that you have a clear idea of what you want to be doing in life or what you want to be learning, and that there's ample evidence supported throughout your essays that that's all happening. Those are all very much boxes I am trying to check. The two boxes that you just come off as someone that like is cool, like I want this kid. This is a good kid. Those are those yeah, off the top of my head, those are like the big boxes I'm checking. It is very different than like I did a sport. And
Yes.
well, and to be fair, like good GPA and test scores are boxes, but those come very early in the process. And maybe that's why in retro, like the hindsight, is always like they checked the boxes. It's like, well, yeah, they checked a couple, and
Mhm.
but that's the starting line, and a lot of it comes down to is it's really hard to get into Stanford and Yale and Princeton and all these schools. Is that it's more complicated than just having that. And she checked, often the student. My takeaway is like they checked the wrong boxes. I
Mm.
guess they checked boxes that weren't the ones they actually needed to be checking. Maybe it's closer to the truth
Right.
because they ended up with an application. I feel bad. Yeah, we'll get to both. In both cases, I end up feeling bad because of this one. I look at it and I see it's like I know why this didn't work.
Mhm.
It's because this process is really complicated and kind of high level. And there's a term that I cannot find on Google right now, and I
Okay.
promised it exists, and I've read it multiple times. And next, there'll be a random episode where we're talking probably about like the UC application coming out soon. I'll be like, by the way, I found the term. Here's what it
It's gonna
means.
come to you.
So keep listening, kids at home. What it is it is a, I guess, like a moniker or kind of a meme at high level universities of basically it's a like thanks but no thanks term they use for a student that checks all the boxes. We say that they have the stats and they can absolutely hang, and then the kid comes
Mhm.
off as well enough. But because they are Stanford or Harvard or what have you, they have to reject a lot of students they like. And
Right.
I think it's basically a thanks but no thanks term where it's something similar to like adequate but not exceptional, basically. And what it means is that there's nothing wrong with the student.
Mhm.
There's really no red flags, and there's nothing that makes us not want them. However, there is nothing that makes them stand out. And that is why we're going to reject them.
Hmm.
And that is a very high number of students who are like in this option A pile. We'll say it's every girl who doesn't get in is this story. It's true. Every time
Okay.
it's true. When this new story comes out 1 to 3 times a year, and if it's a girl, it's because she did dance and band and did everything right and wrote about mental health. If it's a boy, it's because he was very sensible, but like I wouldn't let that kid in. What a prick! Like so, like that's how we're gonna define it. So the girl here, that's option A. The girl here, she would have been. That's her problem. Is that I guess in a sense, her problem was she reached too high for what her application strength was. She wasn't good enough for these schools, or she didn't have what they wanted, and that's why it can be hurtful. Because like the difference between the two is I look at this application and I know I would have taken it a very different direction.
Mhm.
But I also look at it like, yeah, like those aren't the extracurriculars that I believe tend to get students into schools like Stanford and Harvard and Yale and Princeton. But then I've had students with similar, and to be fair, I work with students, they do not get into Harvard, Stanford, Yale, or Princeton, but they do get into Columbia and, or excuse me, Cornell and Rice, and maybe as far up as like Brown and Penn if we get a little lucky. That is like I've had when it doesn't work out, of course, I'm reading these articles, I've seen them, and I am being like, well, how would have I done it? Like, well,
Mhm.
yeah, that's maybe why I come think it's like they didn't do it right, certainly, or they certainly didn't do it the way I did, and it didn't work out. So
Yeah.
yeah, all I can do is theory craft, like seeing what their pieces are, and yeah, I wish they had gotten either my help or the help of somebody who was a little bit better at this because I see what their plan was, and it wasn't good enough for what they had at the table. Whereas there are going to be students that are truly excellent. That's why you go back to the spiky versus well-rounded. I think about it a lot is like
Mhm.
being spiky can save students from themselves. Like I see like a well-rounded student is often the case. I see what they did. I'm like, yeah, I would have had to do some real back end stuff to fix this. But then I'm like the essay topics. I go, oh heavens no, like that is not going to writing about overcoming like writing about like personal incidents they had with people on the street and stuff like no that is not how you save this kind of application like on the back end either. Yeah, and then I feel bad because it's like a very cynical way to look at it, like, but
Yeah.
it's different than me saying Stanford accepts 4% of students. It's like I don't know, and under those guys, like I get why these students often end up in that 96 percentile.
I feel like Zach probably had pretty high expectations for
We're getting to
himself,
Zach.
though.
This
Yeah.
is all the girl. We're
Okay,
getting
the
to
girl. Yes, yes.
we're
Okay.
getting to Zach. This is Amanda, the girl who
Okay.
yeah.
So they're shooting like too high for what they have usually.
I don't blame them for trying, and I consider and well, it's not that they didn't get in, it's that this became a national news story that I'm reading about.
Uh-huh.
Thousands of students are just like Amanda, I would say. Yeah,
Right.
every year, at least
That's true.
1,000. There are fewer Zachs, Zacharys, but they exist as well. There are definitely more Amandas than Zachs, like those are the 2.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's just like I'm so deep inside this game that I read these and I go like, "Oh, no, why would you do that? Oh, no, why would you do that? Oh, no, why would you do that?" Because well, that is a benefit of working with consultants, especially someone with a good
Mhm.
track record who has strategy and you like the strategy is there is no way if Amanda works with me that is what her application looks like, Like
Right.
and could the results be the same, I suppose, but no, like yeah, I look at it and just like I chance her, I size her up. Like I really do
Mhm.
believe that had we worked together, these results would be significantly better. And I'm like, I get why she got into Georgia Tech. Her stats were good enough, but like that is kind of a kiss of death when you were just getting into. Honestly, I get kinda heated. That's what happened to me when I was like my first year or 2 when I wasn't nearly as good at this. That was what I found with students when I did it wrong, and that is a big
Okay.
reason that I am that's probably the number one reason I'm so adamant that, like, consultants matter, essays matter, like, all these things are truly relevant towards your ability to get into these schools because I have seen my own results with students dramatically increase as I A, figured out how to actually do an application, and then quite honestly, B, hiring you to cover my weaknesses on the other aspects of the application. It all matters.
Mhm.
And then my same students that I would say, if anything, like it's not like I'm getting better and better students every year. They're very strong, but like it's the same level, roughly the same level of strong every year. And just being able to see the results get better, that's how I could be like, okay, it totally matters. And then that's how I can also look at someone who well, it's several steps below where I think the type of work I like to do with students because she hasn't done this 80 times and isn't a crazy person, I guess, and doesn't
Exactly.
hire other people to make sure that like that their weaknesses are saved. Yeah, and then it doesn't work out. And I'm supposed to sit
Mhm.
there, but it's not like what went wrong, Like, well, that's me. This is me answering the question of what went
Yeah.
wrong, and that is what the news piece always covers it as. Like, how is this possible? So then I sit there and I just kind of like blurt it all out, like, well, this is how it
Mhm.
was possible. This is what happened. Oh, I can't wait to get to Zachary. That's very different. It's very different.
Okay, yeah. So let's talk about Zach then, because okay, so we know Amanda probably maybe set her expectations a little bit too high, and maybe and also didn't work with somebody like you for her application. Now, Zach, on the other hand, I mean, he's got $30 in revenue in a company that he created, and he's not getting in anywhere. And I feel like he probably had pretty high expectations for what he thought his outcome was going to be.
So independently, I found this article and I was yucking it up with students. And what I did first is I read his personal statement, which I think we will do. And I think it's
Yes, we'll
important
talk about that.
because yeah, Amanda's personal statement, we don't have to. There are thousands of Amandas. Like that is the key.
Mhm.
Is that it's not fun. I mean, I'm not making fun of Amanda. Like I feel bad for Amanda. It sucks.
Right.
The girl worked really hard, and I'm sure she's really upset. And I wish it had gone differently, either by her getting better help or simply her having a better strategy in general. Like I do sympathize. I feel bad. Zachary, I read his personal statement, and can we just read Zachary's personal statement? Because like this is yeah, yeah. Go ahead and read it
Okay.
because it's important.
Sorry, Zach, in advance, but we have to go through this. So he used the common app prompt discuss an accomplishment, event, or realization that sparked a period of personal growth and a new understanding of yourself or others. All right, so this is Zach's personal statement. I will never go to college. I texted my mom on January 14th, 2019. And for years, I believed this with every fiber of my being. At a young age, I saw that kids were funneled down the same narrow path: get good grades, attend a good college, land a good job, live a good life. It felt like a prescriptive formula devoid of individuality. I rejected convention and took to self learning. By age 7, I was coding. By 10, I was giving lessons for $30 an hour. By 12, I published my first app on the App Store. By 14, my online gaming website was earning 60,000 annually. And by 16, I had a six-figure exit. YouTube was my personal tutor, teaching me everything from programming to filing my LLC's taxes. Toward the end of my junior year, while classmates prepared for exams that would ostensibly dictate their futures, I was returning from a startup accelerator, emboldened on my unconventional path. I had launched my latest app, Cal AI, which tracks calories just by taking a picture of food. Encouraged by initial positive feedback, I decided to move to San Francisco with my co founder for the summer. Within a week, I found myself interviewing my first employee. Who was I to question a man with 24 more years of experience and a family to support? My imposter syndrome became a source of motivation, pushing me to be the last person to leave the office every night. So you're not going, right? VCs, founders, mentors, nearly everyone reinforced the same narrative. I didn't need college. Cal AI had become the fastest growing app in its category. Our team grew to 50 employees, our users had collectively lost tens of thousands of pounds, and investors were constantly trying to throw money at us, which we rejected. Then one night, I refreshed my App Store Connect dashboard and saw it $1 million of revenue in the last 30 days. As the dopamine surged through my body and I threw my hands in the air in victory, something felt missing. What was next? It wasn't loneliness, it was a question of purpose. Was this treadmill of capitalism what the rest of my life was designated for? Yes, my app was helping hundreds of thousands of people lose weight, but would I ever feel this rush again? Was my North Star money, pride, fame, or something else entirely? A month later, I was still searching. Serendipity brought me to a rock garden in Kyoto, where a young Jobs once searched for a similar answer. No, I wasn't magically struck with the right answer like I wanted, but the deliberate imperfection of the stones, the paradox of asymmetry as both chaos and order, lodged itself in my mind, a quiet contradiction I couldn't let go. Maybe life is just this, a tapestry of contradictions where meaning isn't found in resolution, but in the act of exploring the in between. In my rejection of the collegiate path, I had unwittingly bound myself to another framework of expectations, the archetypal dropout founder. Instead of school teachers, it was VCs and mentors steering me toward a direction that was still not my own. College, I came to realize, is more than a mere rite of passage. It's the conduit to elevate the work I've always done. In this next chapter, I want to learn from humans, both professors and students, not just from computers or textbooks. I began my journey fiercely independent, determined to forge my own path. Now I see that individuality and connection are not opposites, but complements. We're all individuals, but we're also part of something larger. Through college, I'll contribute to and grow within that larger whole, empowering me to leave an even greater, lasting, positive impact on the world. Now, nearly 5 years later, I'm ready to send a new text. I'm going to college.
Okay, Michelle.
Oh,
I've
Zach.
I've talked a lot about what you want to do, the boxes you want to check, yes, etc. But the reason this I say, what is the single worst thing you can come off as in a college application?
Oh,
Single worst
like
thing.
arrogant?
Too cool for school.
Okay, yeah.
By definition, being too cool for school is the single worst. Yes, you did hit it though. As I say, the two like ghouls that haunt college applications, I call it is two A's: arrogant and anxious. In
Yes.
particular, boys cannot come off as anxious, and girls should not come off as excuse me, boys should not come off as arrogant, and girls should not come off as anxious. If you have like the
Ah,
opposite, it's not
okay.
quite as bad. A girl can come off as a little arrogant, and a guy can come
Uh-huh.
off as a little anxious for reasons that you would home can theory craft. Like, oh yeah, I kind of see that. But yeah, he comes off as arrogant and well, this is the top school in the country, but I always reminds me of if you ever look at Naviance charts or even niche, like the students who get into schools is usually pretty logical based on their test scores and their stats. But over in the top right, there are always a couple red X's I'm like curious about. It's like,
Mm.
what happened here? Like not 98 students get in and two didn't. It's like, what did they do? And I've always because and you never meet those, you never find them. But there's two theories. One is that they literally wrote in their supplements, "My parents are making me apply here. Please don't accept me. I don't want to go, but they'll make me go." Like I do believe that that does happen.
Oh,
And yeah,
okay.
we're talking about like 1 to 2% of students here. And that option A makes sense to me.
Mhm.
The other option is that they write an application or supplements that usually supplements that make the person reading imply that it would be beneath them to attend that school,
Ooh,
that they would
okay.
be beneath them in any particular way, and I get that because I would also reject that kid's full out. Like, how dare
Mhm.
you? Where people who work at these schools, even if it's not Harvard or Yale, like they have a high opinion of their own school. They usually went there, and I get that. Like if I worked at Tulane, someone was shit talking Tulane in the Tulane application, I wouldn't let them into Tulane, even though I
Right.
personally shit talk Tulane and don't care for it. Still my school. I want okay. How about this with Zachary? I wanted to just say like LOL this guy and rip on Zach and call him Zachary because I'm me and it's funny to call him Zachary over and over again. I hope he doesn't sue me too. But actually reading his application, reading his essays, well, I was laughing about them, and then he mentioned the 60,000 in his thing, and I was like, "Oh, that's actually a lot of money." And then I went and looked at his ECs, and he really has made real money on his app that people actually use. And
Mhm.
that's when I suddenly switched from like, "Look at this goofball," which is often the case when someone's like suing schools. I always laugh at them. It's like, "Sorry, dude, maybe you should have tried harder." It's like it wasn't because there's nothing to sue over. Like, but instead, I read it, and then again, started feeling bad because there was actually there was quite a bit of time and effort put into that personal statement. Is my first takeaway. Is that is
Mm,
not a
okay.
that is not a lazy hack job essay. It's really not. And
Yeah.
I felt bad because I guarantee if I had worked with Zach, he would have gotten into very good schools because there's pieces reading his essay. This is often what happens when students bring a completed essay to me, wanting me to look at it. I don't do it very
Mhm.
much because it's not really my system. But every single time I hear it, and well, there's a bunch of alarms that start firing that make me like in theory I could just nitpick all the problems with it, but
Right.
instead I listen to it and there's like one or two or three things that jump out to me that I go, oh, okay, so let's I want to do an essay about that. And I ask, all right, why did you make
Oh.
I would say, why did you make is the kid fat? Like I don't know. Like that would be my first question. It's like why did
Oh,
you make an
okay.
app? Yeah, why did you make an app about weight loss? Like why did you care about that? And I
Mhm.
don't know that answer. Yeah, like that his entire application is about the importance of weight loss in America and why it matters to him and how technology is like a tool yeah, it's, and if he's not those guys like you care about your health and yeah,
Right,
that,
right.
that's all I could think about is that his entire application is not about like it's time for college. Instead, it's like he's fascinated by by health and how technology can keep humans
Interesting.
healthy.
Okay.
And I was looking at his application. I was thinking about a student we had 2 years ago. It was he was the forecasting student, right?
Uh-huh.
It wouldn't have ever gone that way, but you could see a scenario where that student, without proper guidance, could come up with an application that wasn't as strong, I guess. This
Yes.
kid has an ego, right? And a lot of
Right.
tech entrepreneur types do. And a little bit I'm like, LOL. But then if there's real money involved, I tend to respect your average 17-year-old who think is a tech entrepreneur a
Mhm.
lot more than than someone who doesn't. And this kid made enough money that I respect him. He's allowed to have an ego. He runs a company. That's just my take. However, that ego doesn't work well in college application, and that's why it's hard for me to read this because my takeaway would not be just like yell at the kid and say make it better. For me to realize that this is just the wrong angle. You need to talk about like. So why you need to fucking love learning, kids. That's why you always fucking love learning
He
because it
picked the
saves
wrong
you.
subject in the first place then.
Yeah, yeah, and it bums me out because I guarantee if I'd worked with this young man Zachary, it wouldn't have been like I was constantly fighting him to like not come off as so arrogant or egotistical. Instead, I would simply guide him towards talking about the technology behind it and what's so exciting about it and his passion because he's obviously passionate about the subject. I lead him towards that, and just like with the student 2 years ago, you could see how it wasn't like it would be a big fight, right? He was like, oh, okay,
Mhm.
cool. That's why this one's a little bit trickier because instead of because with the Amandas of the world, like I see basically a series of mistakes throughout the entire process that led to an application that simply didn't work at the end for a way that
Right.
is very common. This one is closer to, I guess, like a tragedy because I absolutely could have met Zach closer to the finish line at the very end, not had to really like clean anything up or like do any insane. I wouldn't have had to do any insane consulted essay magic to make Zach's application work. Instead, it
Okay.
would have been knowing what to focus on, how to go through it in a way that's why focusing on the backing up your major focusing on something is so effective. By the way, because it allows you even if you are like kind of like have personalities that maybe aren't the best rooted or your reasons for college aren't the best rooted, that's okay because instead you're talking about how much you care about public health and how like what you want to do in school, like why you're going back to school. I wish he wasn't such a strong candidate in the first place because then we could just laugh at this guy who thought he was too good for college. There
Yeah.
are a fair number of Zachs out there as well. The difference is most of them do not have the actual on paper success and track record that he does. I guarantee you, if he those other students are also don't do very well in the process. And
Mhm.
similarly, I guess I never fell for the Amanda trap because that was obvious to me. But I felt like early on in my career, I work with students with egos, especially young men who are successful, and usually they want to be politicians or they want to go into finance or they want to go into STEM. And
Right.
it's a certain type of guy. Like I've worked with Zachs, and it is very important to kind of tail that towards a certain path. I understand because, well, the people reading these like they also see a lot of Zachs.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on Zach's essay?
I mean, it definitely came across as like tech bro arrogant to me. So I could see how that would turn off like an admissions officer. And then I also don't think like the FLL comes through because he was kind of talking about like, "Oh, this is where I'm gonna have a social life," after years of grinding. So, I didn't feel like that would land very positively with an admissions officer either.
Yeah, and I guess essay is also kind of where like the idea of like showing your being authentic in an application is kind of an
Yeah.
interesting concept because that is an authentic essay, you know? Like this kid
It's
really
true,
is
he was authentic.
and I know it's authentic because I've had conversations with students that are pretty similar to this one. It's like and often it's me asking questions that they probably ask those reps. It's like, why do you want to go to college? You're on a successful tech company. And usually, and to be completely honest, usually the student's answer is somewhere between because that's what I do now because I'm 17 or 18 and they don't really
Mhm.
know. And I go, yeah, you should go to college anyways. I don't know, you'll be 22. But yeah, I've worked with students that they're very like his path is very similar to theirs and but you don't write that, like that is the thing,
Yes.
and that is why when I'm reading it is just like Amanda, my mind goes, what would I have done differently? How do I get a different result? And that is
Mhm.
different. That's what it's not. It's a bit different than like this kid didn't deserve to get in, or like like or that the justice was prevailed. That's not my takeaway. I kind of want it to be, but then I hear you read this, I'm like, no, that's not really my takeaway. It's like this is a bummer. Like this kid needed better help because
Right.
and it's also different than Zach didn't need to lie. He didn't need to not be him in any way. And I keep thinking about that one student. Like his essays, I think, come off as very confident, if nothing else. The student 2 years ago, like the
Mhm.
forecasting student. It's not like we changed his personality. And yeah, like that, he had an ego too because he was a really high level coder, and
Yeah.
high level coders tend to have egos. I mean,
How do you walk that line though between confidence and arrogance? How do you help your students with that?
by knowing what to focus on.
Okay, so you might have to take a totally different focus to kind of get off that
Right, and
arrogance.
and that is I think that's the theme is that, like, as I continue to talk with you about what really is my strategy and what I have to think about it myself, it goes back to the FLL stuff, is, like, knowing what to focus on is such a cheat code almost because there are so many problems that are due to thanks to my system and how I guide students initially with it, I'm almost shocked and appalled and like how could this happen when I see it in an essay? And that's why I'll tell students when it's like November and December and I'm tired. It's like you actually underestimate how helpful I am. I promise. Because having the right mindset and knowing what to focus on and going through that, it works. It works. And it also very conveniently makes it pretty much impossible to end up with a personal statement like that one. Because if Zach had just written 650 words, and that's the thing, he spent time, he spent energy. He obviously really cared about this. If he had spent that time and
Yeah.
energy instead, just simply doing an essay on his background with either weight loss and personal health, slash how why his like what his app means to him, and then I guarantee a really fun one about like how technology is so important for carbon based life forms to do well. Those are very straightforward essay topics that I guarantee he'd have opinions on.
Mhm.
And if he'd just written about that with some or in yeah, like you can't come off as like I guess you can still come off as like really arrogant, but the part that comes off as really arrogant is probably the first half where he's just talking about like look how much look I did this, isn't that cool? And like yeah, like I'm now going to college stuff. The
Right.
topic itself is poisonous in a way that even though that the actual essay is pretty good, actually there's some good writing in there, it doesn't work. Whereas if it just went the topic of just write about how much you love technology as it relates to weight loss, and yeah, you can talk about your app within it if you want. I would like to see that essay. I like to see like what that looks like because yeah, maybe in theory you could still come off as really kind of arrogant about it. Like I guess talk about like public health, like weight loss. You can there's definitely a bad way to do that. But this kid it's an interesting essay because it's not like this kid doesn't have some tact. There's absolutely like that essay is not him trying to talk about think he's the best thing ever. It's him trying to talk diligently and passionately and honestly about what he thinks about education and where he stands and how he's going to go there. It's like he is checking boxes in a way that is
Yes.
technically correct, but he has done so in a way that what is your opinion is like the tech pro douchebag, right?
Kind of, yes.
Yeah. I guess
And I
mine
just see how that would not give a good impression to admissions readers.
and maybe that's how I remember early in my career is the only time that there were essays that I've done that I no longer stand by. Basically, it's around my third year, about within like my third, fourth year, I is when I really locked it in, and I pretty much
Mhm.
stand by all the work I've done with students, and done with a few exceptions. But the first couple of years, I didn't know what I was doing, as I mentioned, and I'm helping students out with stuff, and something I remember is I would have other people read the essays, and particularly my mom, I'd have her read them, and there were ones
Okay.
I was really proud. It was always the ones that I was like, "No, this is gonna work. I'm smart. I know this. Like, this is like, I'm the smartest guy ever. I can make this work." Those ones my mom would be like, "Yeah, I don't like this one." She
Oh.
gave very similar reactions to you. I was like, "Why?" It's like, comes off like a tech douchebag, and that's maybe what I'm gonna realize is that I have morphed my opinion about like what makes is a good essay through like to mirror the lens of the people who actually tend to read these because like what like in theory like I would read these and have a different opinion, but I have a very similar opinion to you. But it's because I have kind of beaten myself into submission about like what is and isn't good in a college essay, whether that's how
Right.
I actually feel or not. So my actual views of this guy is it's kind of tech douchebag. I don't know, but it's well, my it was he backs it up. Like my actual opinion
That's
is
true.
me not having been mind warped by this whole process. I'd let the student into Stanford because it's very impressive and like yeah, the kid is really hardworking. I don't know, it's well written, all that stuff. But
Mhm.
no, that is now it doesn't matter because that's not the I'm not me 7 years ago is not who reads these. It's people much closer to well you honestly younger versions or not really me still, but like that's why I have to change my opinions.
Do you think then that students might be underestimating, like, how much personality and emotional intelligence really is a part of the college application and how they need to make that shine through?
Well, you just heard me wax poetic about like college essay stuff, and I think anyone who's finding this one you guys have 2 options. You can think I'm just like a crazy person, like you can just be like this, but that these are my live reacts. That's why live reacts are a bit
Yeah.
messy for me because I'm a messy guy when I read things. I have a lot of opinions. And me just blurting out all the things that, like, I wanna do different like, it's much easier for me to theory craft, like, what I would've done differently than it is to go, "Oh, well, he made a mistake here. He made a mistake here.
Mhm.
He made a mistake here," because that is why I think having a core strategy and just going through it over and over and over again is going to be so much easier than trying to individually, like, clean stuff up. That's why
Right.
if Zach came to me, and that's the case when students bring complete work to me, I almost always end up doing a completely different application with them or essays with them or telling them what to do based on a few bit points from it because that what makes it's more comfortable for me. It's my system, but that is
Mhm.
an easier way to eliminate the men. There are multiple flaws in the essay. He comes off like a douchey. He over it's very resume-y. It's I call the 18-wheeler
Yeah, it
method.
was
He
like
has
almost like a LinkedIn post or something,
yeah,
some of it.
it's the second half of the essay it doesn't really hit in the way that he's trying to hit about how important college is.
Right.
Just the topic in general is too cool for school, I mentioned. And yeah, those are the major ones that come up to me. And I don't know how to like individually clean those up as opposed
Mhm.
to tell me about why did you make this app in the first place? Okay, and we're off writing about how much he loves learning and how technology will help us all. Like
Oh,
like
got
that
it.
that is my big takeaway is that knowing just what to write about, like essay topics, and that's going to be what I'm talking about soon with like my personal statement episode. Is
Mhm.
maybe I can give more information on how you actually get there.
And what do you think, students who are seeing this and are like, well, this kid like created his own app. He's got like $1 million in revenue. He didn't get into an elite college. Like, how in the world am I going to get into one? Are the expectations starting to get just like too high, or is it that,
Well, that's why it's a shame.
yeah,
This student has the goods to get into every school in the country, and that's why I want to just dunk on the young man and said I wish he'd hit me up, like more than Amanda, honestly. Like if Amanda hit me
hmm
up. Man hands I'm pretty sure we get her into Cornell early decision and cash him. But yeah, Zach could have gotten into Harvard and Stanford and Yale and MIT. He is the exact 11 out of tens is the term I use. About one about yeah a little under one student a year. We end up with that is notably higher level than is even our high level standards. And I take great pride. Those students very consistently get into multiple top 5, top 10 schools because yeah, like on paper, he's very impressive. That's why all he had to do was write about how much he loves learning. Like that's maybe why it's
right.
frustrating, and maybe it's too obvious to me. But but the, he was a good enough writer, and he obviously cared enough about this. There was just a few strategy points of like what to focus on. It all could have turned out, even if he does come off as a little bit like haughty or arrogant within it.
hmm
Anything, the takeaway should be that yeah, this is hard. It is hard to get into Harvard and Stanford and Yale and Princeton. Although I also would have seen him rejected from Cornell and like Emory and stuff because they really probably were like this kid's not showing up. Like I don't know, like whatever.
That's what I was gonna
Uh,
say. Yeah. Could some of the rejections be that like he's too impressive? Yes.
yeah,
We don't see him that he's even going to say yes to our
yeah.
school.
Like also that this process is hard and. I call them landmines, is that like this personal statement went to every single school, and that's why it's hard when there's a mistake in an application, and why I'm so, I guess, fervent about like what not to do in an application, because the same mistake or something handled improperly, it scales in a way that devastates overall results. And
Mm,
in this case, yeah, it is top level. These schools, the top school, like these top schools may have still been pretty interesting. He's very impressive, but they probably just went like, I don't know, man. Like he just like I'm
right.
sure he was in the hunt. It's not like he was immediately rejected. I'm sure he was like, it's
Okay.
whatever, dude. Like he just didn't make, 'cause they didn't like him that much, and 4% still 4%, and there's other people with impressive apps, and CS is hard. But then you get down to like the Cornell and Emory level, and I bet they immediately went and looked at it and be like, this dude's not even gonna show up. Like he doesn't want to come here.
Yeah.
Like this kid, yeah, is if this kid probably should end up like if he ends up at Harvard, he'll probably actually like enjoy it or whatever. But whatever, man, is probably the takeaway, which is maybe different than I think that the internet's reaction of, or it's not, the reaction was not like, "Ha ha ha, you'll see, you arrogant little," it's like, "Whatever, man," because these people read a lot of these a day, and they just didn't like them that much. Then the lower you go, the more you're gonna get people being like, "Whatever, man, also screw this kid, he's not showing up, like, I'm not fighting for
Yeah,
this
that's why
kid."
I was
I wish his essays was, like, better or it was worse. Like, I wish he came off like more annoying. We could just, like, laugh at Zachary. Instead instead I get bummed out
yeah,
because
that's true.
his essays matter, his application matters, and doing it right is important, but also not doing it wrong is also important. And he did it wrong, and these are the results. And just he Zachary makes the news because he is so impressive, and also I think he like put on Twitter, "Hey Penny," and also he is trying to like sue a bunch of people. But like there are Zacharys out there as well, and quite honestly, most of them are much less impressed with paper on Zachary, and there are plenty of young men that come off as arrogant and do not well do in this process, and we don't
Mhm.
hear about them because they don't make the news. Just like there are many people like Amanda who are well rounded and do not do anything to fix that problem and don't get in. Like that is probably the takeaway is both of these cases are not isolated. They're just the ones the news decided to report upon.
Right. And how do you, when you're working with students, like if, they think they check all the boxes, how do you help them kind of like manage their expectations of like, you know, this isn't necessarily, you're not going to have, you might not necessarily have the outcome that you want or,
I don't. Like that's the thing
okay.
is if I was working with Amanda, I would be explaining the flaws in her application. I was saying, but we have a lot of stuff we can figure out here. It's like I would be saying like you're probably not going to get into Harvard, Stanford, Yale. Like, and she would go, yeah, sure, because I don't think Amanda even in the essay like, was like expecting to get into Harvard. Usually she really want to get into
Okay.
usually she really want to get into Brown. And I was explaining to her, Brown. We could try Brown ED, but you're like you're an artsy woman applying to Brown. It's like that's like Harvard difficulty. I
Yeah.
guess by explaining like I tend to do, over explaining every aspect as I see it, I don't have a problem with students.
So you're very upfront with them.
I am, but then with Zachary, I would be explaining like, yeah, dude, I want to get you into Harvard. Like this is incredible. Like you're making how much money? That's real. That's real stacks, bro. Also, why do you want to go to college? Okay, if you like, I don't know. Yeah, I would not be. I would be gassing this kid up. And I. That's often how I sign students. I'm not the guy that was like, how about a nice Florida State? He's like, no. I was like, I size students, and I also have yeah, we go for it, and it was
Mhm.
that goes back to it's like, yeah, and they will be rejected from a bunch of schools, but they kinda know that too. We put a 20 the whole strategy just moves forward. It's about setting expectations, but with neither of these students would I be my takeaway for neither of them had I got to meet them early on would be you're aiming too high necessarily because
Okay.
assuming Amanda wants to get Brown ED, but like in that group, she'd be fine with Cornell, Berkeley maybe, and
Yeah.
assuming Zach wants to go to Harvard or Yale or Princeton or MIT or probably doesn't want to go to college. In both cases, I'd be like, yeah, that makes sense. I think that's an adequate goal. I can't guarantee anything, but then I would work real hard with them, and I would say 90% plus of the time in my career, we reach the goal they're looking for. So I would keep doing that, and maybe that's why yeah, my takeaway is not they reached too high, so they did it wrong.
Okay.
Mhm.
And so what would be like I guess your most helpful piece of advice for students who are like, yeah, I check all the boxes. I've got we keep saying check the boxes, but let's just say they really do think that and they've got like these high expectations. What's your advice for them moving forward with college applications?
Complicated. I guess what could have helped both there's such different problems in that
Mhm.
we have now put out, like 30, 35 podcast episodes. There's another like 10 coming before we start working. What's the question? Like, what one piece of advice? Like, I don't know.
What could students do? to come through as authentic but not arrogant,
I
maybe.
we will end up refilming it before this little episode. We're gonna refilm the effing loves learning episode because
Oh,
that
okay.
is that remains the core of my that is the core of my process. When you're applying to school, you're applying to be a student. That is the goal, and they are trying to pick the best students. So in your application, you should come off as the best student. And with Amanda of the world, like talking about how much you overcame problems or learned a hard lesson or whatever, like that doesn't make you a great student inherently. And that you like a bunch of stuff. With
Mhm.
Zach, building a bunch of stuff and being really successful, but now it's time to head back to school and learn something that doesn't make you the best student. I guess that is the one encompassing problem I guess I see with both. Understanding that mindset that you're trying to show how you be the best student possible, that will solve a lot of problems, and in both these cases would have surely made better applications. But it's
Okay.
not that it I have no idea. You gotta like really care or hire a crazy person because like
If you could talk to Zach now, today, and he's facing, he's got all these rejections, he's got to move forward, what would you tell him?
I'd ask him if he wants to reapply, and then if he does,
Okay.
I'd go back to so like talk about your app. Why did you want to build a weight loss app? You're not even fat. Were you fat? And and then that's how I work with students. Like that would
Okay.
be, and then we're off from there. It would not be let's talk about your essay and what went wrong. I would say you want to try again. Okay, why'd you build a weight loss app?
So it's
Yeah,
not over for him. You would say he should maybe try again.
I have no idea. Yeah, like reapply. Well, it'd probably be difficult now that I believe he is like suing schools
Mm,
and is now a like meme on the internet. It might be a little bit trickier.
that's a
I
good point.
I have no opinion on if students can or should reapply to schools. I don't know how it works. I'd probably talk to him about yeah, like why do you want to go to college in the first place? And I guess the irony of his essay is like I don't know. Just I've had this conversation with students that didn't work out. I was like, "Why do you wanna go to college?" And then
Mhm.
they don't really know. I was like, "Just don't go to college, man." Like, I don't know. Like, you make 30 million a year, whatever. Like, who cares?
Right,
Like,
right.
mostly I would just would yeah, it would mostly be like, "Why?" I want exactly. Like, he's on Twitter. If he finds us, like, "Why did you make a weight loss app?" Like, that is the question. He's an online person. If anyone
Mhm.
supported him, I'd like to know why did you make this app? Like, why would you care about weight loss and like, what is that journey? Because that is the question that leads to him getting into Harvard and Stanford and Yale. That's what I got for him.
Maybe Zach will see this. Zach, if you're out there, reach
Mhm.
out to
Yeah,
us.
send it to him.
All right. See you next time.
Thank you, Michelle. I am now taking on students for the 2025-26 college admissions season. If you are a current junior who's looking for help specifically with their college application and essays, you should check out my website. It's collegewithmattie.com, and there you can see my services, my blog with other written posts, as well as book out a free consultation where you get a chance to chat with me and see how I might be able to help. Looking forward to meeting you.